Okay, so we just finished learning about the line tool and the offset tool. You should have gone ahead and used the offset tool to offset these lines across there, those prescribed dimensions that they're supposed to be at. The next tool we're going to learn about is called the trim tool. Trim tool is just going to go ahead and trim extra tails of lines, trim them away where we don't need them. The opposite of trim is extend. So you see up here, we see that we have the trim tool button. We have a little caret on the side. If we click on that caret, you have the option of either trimming or extending. Extending is just like it says, that's extending lines, making them longer if you need to do that. So we can clip on the trim tool button, or in our command prompt we can type out trim, or I like to just hit TR enter. Takes me into the trim command. Okay, once in the command, the first thing it's going to ask for is to select the cutting edges. The cutting edges, if we want to trim all these three lines away out of the middle of our drawing space, and we're going to use this line as the cutting edge to trim them away from. So we select that as the cutting edge, then we right click. Then it's going to ask to select object to trim or shift. Well, we're just going to shift will extend it, but we want to trim it. So we're just going to again select these lines. You notice how they're all going black. Right click enter to get out of the command, and it trimmed them all away at that line, which I used as my cutting edge line. I'm going to go ahead and bring them back. A more expedient way to do it, I hit TR, enter, enter, and it's going to bypass that cutting edge, and it's just going to allow me just to click lines to trim. So automatically it trimmed all of those, and because I clicked in between these two lines, that's where it's going to trim away from. So I wanted to get rid of those lines, and then I want to get rid of this line, and that will finish out my border lines in my title block. And it was a much faster way than having to select this as a cutting edge line, cutting those lines, then going back into the trim tool, select this as a cutting edge line, and then select that line that was inside there. It was much faster. Alright, so now we're going to go into actually adding text into our title block. I'm going to first go to my construction line layer. I'm going to change this color real quick, make it a little easier to see. We'll do some kind of like a pink here. It kind of pops out. Construction line. Alright, so we did lines before. These are all individual line segments that we've been drawing with. The other option is to do a polyline. So a polyline, I'm going to select a polyline. I'm going to just draw kind of a makeshift shape here real quick. When I select this line of my title block, I'm only selecting that line segment. When I select this line, I'm selecting the entire shape, because the polyline doesn't do individual line segments. It still differentiates those kind of line segments with those nodes, but it's all one entity. So if I were to select that and delete it, it's going to delete the whole thing. So again, I'll draw a shape real quick. That can be handy, especially if you want to do like a rectangle, for instance, for your title block. The only problem is then when you go to offset, so if I want to offset this, we'll do our distance of 0.25. It's going to offset the entire thing because it's all one line, which in this case, I only wanted these bottom lines and not all these other side lines. So to bypass that, we go to the explode tool, which is right above the offset tool. We go to explode, we select that, right click to get out of it, and then now it took those individual line segments and broke them down into their individual components instead of them all being one. So now if I go into offset, select that line, it's only going to offset that one line like I want it to. Alright, so that's another way, or that's also the polyline. So I'm going to do a polyline construction line. And the reason why is because when I'm finished, I want to be able to just select one line and not all the individual lines. It's just going to speed things up and make it a lot easier for me in the long run. So I got my construction lines there. The reason being is we're going to use the midpoint. So I'm going to go to a line just real quick so I can show you. There's that midpoint object snap. That's the midpoint of that diagonal line that I drew in between or in the center of that rectangle. The easiest way to find the center of a rectangle is to draw the diagonal from opposite corners, and then you select the midpoint of that diagonal line, and that's the exact center point of that rectangle. So I'm going to switch over to my text layer. There's two different types of text. Up here's the text tool. You click on this caret underneath. We have multi-line text and we have single-line text. Multi-line is just like it says. It's like a paragraph or like a page out of a book. We have multiple lines going down. A single line is just what it says, which is what we're going to use here. We just want a single line of text inside that rectangle. So I'm going to select single line. Now we look at here. These are, we've talked about these little subcategories over here in the command prompt. So I'm in the text tool, and then it's asking me to specify the start point of the text. Well, I can just click and that'll be my start point. However, I want to justify what type of text I'm going to be using. So in order to do that, I could click on justify, or I just type in J, hit enter, and then it's going to give me all these different options of how to justify. Well, I want the middle and the center of that text, or sorry, that rectangle. So I'm going to click on MC for mid-center. And then I'm going to specify my middle point as my start point. My height, it's asking for the height there. Kind of over here we can see it. Specify the height. For text type, the standard size is always 0.125. So type in, that's 1/8 of an inch, 0.125. It's going to ask for my rotation angle. Since I want it to be parallel with the x-axis and not rotated off some degree, for instance, so my text would be off on that 30-degree angle, I would type in like 30 degrees. Well, I want it to be 0 degrees parallel with my x-axis, so I'm not going to change the rotation angle. Just hit enter, and then I'm going to type in my text. The first text here, we do everything in all caps, so drawing name, enter, enter, that gets out of the command. Now I'm just going to copy this and paste it in each one of these rectangles using that center point. So I do CO for copy, select objects, I'm going to select this text, right click, my base point, I'm going to use that object snap midpoint that pops up. It's really hard to see it right there with that green text. Select that midpoint, and I'm just going to paste it at all these other midpoints. So that midpoint, this one, so on and so forth. Now all I have to do is just edit the text. So I'm done with this construction line. So again, I'm just selecting the one line. I'm going to delete it. Because I did it as a polyline, I don't have to select each individual line. But now I do have to select each individual text and edit it, and just double click, and I can edit those accordingly across there. I'm going to pause the video, come back, and we'll finish up our title block.